Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to our review of Bill and Ted Face the Music. This is the third, well, it's technically the second review we've done on the Bill and Ted films. We did a double review of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey, which you can find previously on our channel. We'll probably leave a link to it in the description down below. And this is the long-awaited sequel. This is just shy of 30 years after the previous film, Bogus Journey, and it's once again starring Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter as the title characters of Bill and Ted. Was there hype for this? I don't know, but it was one of those films in the current movie climate we're in at the moment, 2020, coronavirus delays. This was that movie that I think a lot of people was just looking forward to, either if they were nostalgic from the previous ones or just looking for sort of like a light, upbeat, nice, surface level film. And we'll get into our review in just a second. We'll be mostly spoiler free, but we'll probably tail into like a spoiler section towards the end. But yeah, do let us know your thoughts on Bill and Ted as well. We are pre-recording this review. This will be going up. Well, you'll see when it's going up, but it's going up tomorrow on Thursday. But please do comment along. Let us know your thoughts on this film and indeed the rest of the Bill and Ted franchise as well.
Absolutely. It's yeah, we're pre-recording. Sorry, I almost jumped ahead then. I'm just going to jump into the usual social media posts. So the best way to find out about what we're doing, what videos are coming out, is to follow us on social media. So we're on Facebook at Cinema Savvy and Twitter at Cinema_Savvy. And we have a link in the description for TeePublic below. And there's a link to our double review of Bill and Ted 1 and 2. I'm not going to do it in the voice, but we gave it its own little Bill and Ted style title. But yeah, this is off the bat, like I said, we did the first two. I'm very new to this franchise. It's so weird to call it a franchise. It's a trilogy.
Yeah, it's the trilogy feature. Now. It's a new trilogy, cinematic trilogy.
And so I'm not going to give my complete thoughts on 1 and 2, but summed up, I enjoyed 2 quite a bit. Wasn't the biggest fan of 1, but I didn't really have issues with it. It just wasn't my kind of film. So 3 was a weird one because I'm going to quickly do the usual Keanu Reeves thing. He's John Wick to me, more so than Neo from The Matrix, more so than Duke Kaboom. I think I've seen Point Break many years ago, but to me he is John Wick. So you can only imagine my horror when that set photo came up of him clean shaven. And
he looks older.
I'm not gonna lie, he looks older.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird.
And
shift.
he's like unaged. When he's had his beard, he looks the same as he did 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So coming into this was, again, I couldn't say I'm hyped. I feel bad for the film. So the reason it's at UK cinemas is because Warner Brothers has the UK rights. Obviously, with Tenet, they pushed for the cinema releases to open. This came out yesterday, Wednesday the 16th, but we know that in America it came out on the 2nd of September on video on demand. So anyone that wanted to watch it probably bought it that opening weekend. And it's been a very interesting, they don't release the figures for video on demand, so we have no idea how many people would have bought this. Would people have bought it? Would they have torrented it? So many different things, because we're in this new era. And as you mentioned with the films and how this has gone, it's kind of really hard to be excited for films. We hyped up Tenet, and I think we all were, but I think the big thing for Tenet, even more so than the fact it was a Nolan film, was that it's the first film that cinemas are having reopened with. It had that reputation. You don't want to be the film that comes out 2 weeks after, which is exactly what this was for us over here. And there's Under the Radar, and there's it's just kind of been and gone. It doesn't have the online traction. The people I know on Facebook, they're into these kind of films. They're not talking about it. They're not sharing stuff. People were sharing the trailers a year ago. I think because of everything that's happened, no one would have probably known this film was coming out. The marketing has been non-existent over here as well. So it's kind of sad in that way. We had a trailer for it at Tenet when we saw it together, but I haven't seen any of the trailers. I've not seen TV spots. I've not seen pretty much anything. It just kind of came out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm looking at the box office for this thing, and I know sort of box office figures at the moment, it's like a whole other conversation for another time. So of course it's going to be underperforming, but really as well, I don't think this is a film that would have done particularly well in theaters, even if it was open to everyone going to see it. I just don't think it has that draw. And that's not taken away from Bill and Ted. I think it is very much that cult favorite, from back in the day, from the late 80s into the early 90s. And then it kind of, well, this is the third film. It's almost been 30 years since that second film, but it hasn't sort of been enduring in any way. As you mentioned, Keanu Reeves has, gone on to have a massive career since then. And he's really sort of an actor that's had 2 phases. He's sort of had the whoa bro dude surfer kind of Keanu Reeves, probably up until about The Matrix. And then, John Wick comes along, and now his entire identity and persona as an actor has just completely changed. Everyone now calls him John Wick, probably more than they, call him Keanu by name now. Alex Winter, I'm sure he's done some other stuff as well, but nowhere near compared to the amount of stuff that Keanu's done. But it's nice to see him back for this thing. This thing, I think, mostly was on VOD in the United States, which I think is some kind of, as you mentioned, like streaming buy-in kind of streaming service. And I honestly think that that is the right environment for it. And even when you look at the film, it absolutely screams TV film. It feels it was done on a budget of 25 million, so it's not like a massive budget film, but then again, neither were any of the other previous Bill and Ted films. So I'm glad that it's low budget, but even like the effects in it and everything like that do look very sort of sci-fi TV film. The way it looks, it's very digital, it's very glossy, so visually it doesn't sort of marry up to the previous two that's come out, but that's like most films now. It's cheaper to film on digital than it is to shoot on actual film. But the one thing that I was looking forward to with this film was that it was bringing the original writers back, Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon. They'd written the previous two entries, and I think the script for this thing was pretty much done and in the can around 2010. So they've been sitting on this for about 10 years now. It was exactly the same plot. They had, the plot, they probably may have changed some things recently, a couple of rewrites perhaps, but the initial premise, the initial plot for this film, getting this song together before the end of the world and performing it to everyone, even with the daughters, I think, was all done in 2010. So I respect them for hanging on to that plot and, clearly having a vision for it and getting it across. I think it just struggled to find the distributor. I think it went from loads of different distributors and no one wanted to take on this thing, probably because it is a lesser known name. But we are living in the age at the moment of, 80s revival, very much this 80s nostalgia. We're getting it with a lot of things, probably kickstarted with Stranger Things, which has made it really popular again. We're getting, Ghostbusters. We're getting constant remakes of older projects and everything. And this just seemed like it was another one like, oh, let's just, dig in here. Let's see what we've got. Oh, we've got Bill and Ted, right? Make another Bill and Ted film. I don't know how much of it was to do with that, but I definitely think that that's why maybe the film has been greenlit now than maybe it would have been, a few years ago, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think a big thing with this is the fact it was written 10 years ago. To me, now I know that strikes as a funding issue. 10 years ago, I'm saying the budget for this was, I don't know the budget, maybe probably 40 million, I'd say, 30 to 40 mil.
25 mil for this film.
25.
Yeah.
I can imagine 10 years ago, Bill and Ted, yeah, it's a classic. 10 years ago, they probably would have said, no, sorry, Keanu's not done much since The Matrix. That's what they'd have said. Mm-hmm. Again, Jonathan Root, Alex Winter, or Keanu. I've not seen much from Alex Winter. I think he'd be a great Hobbit, though, talking of the franchises. But to me, it strikes as they've had this script written 10 years ago. They've waited 10 years. And in that 10 years, Keanu has come back as the household name. Yeah. said Duke Kaboom, John Wick. He did in a couple of comedies as well. Cyberpunk the Game coming out. Last year was like the year of Keanu Reeves. Breathtaking was the meme and everything. And I think this probably was if we can get the funding, we'll do it. Jumping in off that kind of vibe, not to criticize Keanu in it, I think he's fine. I think Alex Winter, in the other two films, they seem on sync. And you said this to me even yesterday, because you saw it on launch, and I'm a bit late to the party. And you kind of mentioned to me that, Alex Winter's perfect. He feels exactly the way he was. And you mentioned Keanu feels a bit more awkward. And I can see that vibe completely. Not that Keanu's not a good person or anything. I think Alex Winters is superb in this. He follows on as someone that saw the trilogy for the first time together. He felt like natural progression, whereas Keanu just felt a bit more, not the sort of dude, the bro thing. It just felt a bit more, not uncomfortable either, but it was like
it felt like he was struggling to get back into those shoes from back then. I think, honestly, out of the two, and it's a shame because they are that great duo, and they still have the certain moments in this film where I do really appreciate it, and they don't go overboard trying to go into like massive character development, but it's been 30 years since the last one, and they do address that in terms of their age, and maybe they should, move on. And there's a really nice scene in the film where Keanu Reeves' character is talking about selling his guitar and sort of giving up the dream of, writing that song that's going to save the world. There's certain scenes in it like that where Keanu Reeves really sort of shines in those more dramatic moments, and there's not loads. I'm not going to say it's like some kind of dramatic film. It isn't, but to me, Alex Winter absolutely carries this duo on his shoulders the entire way through, which is a shame. But, I know as an actor, like, it's your job to kind of play different roles, but going back to the headspace of when you were like a young 20 something. I don't know how old Keanu Reeves was when he made that first Bill and Ted film. It must be difficult. And, you know, we see that a lot. And I'm going to compare this to another comedy sequel. I definitely think this is a lot better than the one I'm going to compare it to. But in terms of that style, you had Dumb and Dumber 2 from a few years ago, where, you know, it was bringing Jim Carrey back, bringing Jeff Daniels back. And both of those actors have done many, many things since. You know, Jim Carrey has moved more into serious roles, I'd say. He's done some more comedic ones in the past, like recently with Sonic. But Jeff Daniels, very, very dramatic persona. So going back into it, it almost feels a bit, I don't want to say sad, but it's not what it was. It's that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Harrison Ford's a great example. Completely unrelated, because I get that, but if you'd have pitched Star Wars 7 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Harrison Ford's no. He's the grumpy one. He won't do it. He wouldn't come back. Mm-hmm. And I think the big thing, and it's completely off point, different, you know, one of the biggest franchises ever made versus two cool classics. Harrison Ford coming back for 7 was bigger than them getting Carrie or Mark to come back. All three did. They'd sent interviews. The three of us signed up together, went out for a meal with George Lucas. The three agreed, all three of us or none of us. And he perfectly went back into, and I think some actors are ready, even though like Mark Hamill kind of is Luke, Carrie was like Leia in terms of their headspace. Harrison Ford was one that was always so distant from that franchise that he snapped back like that, exactly like Alex Winters, whereas Keanu, it must be hard because time has passed. Life, you know, as you mentioned, like he'd have been probably in his early 20s, if that, maybe even younger. Obviously, the life he's had. As well, obviously, a lot of people sort of discuss his personal life and stuff that happened as well. Jumping back into that early 90s thing, it's probably more than just putting on a costume and a voice. It's what you mentioned, it's the headspace. And I think that stood out for me a little bit with Keanu in this. And again, it was getting used to the beard not being there. And it didn't feel like Bill and Ted. It felt like Keanu just helping out. And I know that sounds really rude, and maybe I'm overanalyzing his performance because it is a comedy, and his character has arguably more of an arc in terms of identity and personalization. But there was something that was just sitting, not uncomfortable, but it did stand out more than I thought it would have.
I think it's worth addressing, though, because, you know, say what you want about the films, they are very sort of, I don't want to say cheap, you know, they do what they can with the budget. They do cut corners where they need to. They are very sort of stripped back, very simple. You know, just enjoy, don't try not to think about it too much, just go along with it and you enjoy those characters. And I think that the previous two films nailed that because the duo was so tight, but this one you do start to see the cracks a little bit, sort of like you know what I mean, like the threadbare a little bit between the two, which I do think had a knock on with my enjoyment with this film. I still thought this, if I'm going to sort of go into sort of like general opinions on this film, I thought it was fine. And I think you said exactly the same when we jumped on before we hit live. It's fine. It's perfectly serviceable. It's probably as good as I thought it was going to be. I do think it could have been a lot better. And there are some certain areas throughout the film where I think they could address. So there's two new characters that are introduced into this as well, which is the daughters, which after rewatching Bogus Journey at the end where they said this is Little Bill and Little Ted, I did kind of have this moment of where like, well, they had sons in Bogus Journey, how could they have daughters in this one? I'm like, but it's the same writers. They do address that. There is a very quick throwaway line in there which I thought was kind of funny, that apparently they always called the daughters when they were young Little Bill and Little Ted. It is what it is, but it's an explanation. But it seems like they're really pushing these two characters in this one, and I was kind of worried, you know, we're seeing it in the age now, these soft reboots where Bill and Ted would kind of be pushed to the sidelines and the daughters would kind of lead the charge, and these would be the new leads, and then maybe they'll go on to make sort of Bill and Ted 4 and the daughters will be the leads, which I hope doesn't happen. I think they work in a supporting role, and I actually really like their storyline in this film. So you kind of have two parallel storylines happening at the same time. You have Bill and Ted going off on their adventure where they're sort of, you see it in the trailer, bumping into different versions of themselves from the future, which again, if you stop and think about it, doesn't make any sense at all. If it's the future, then why would there be sort of like different iterations of themselves? And then you've got the daughters who are doing, which does kind of feel like the soft reboot thing. It feels a bit retready where we're kind of doing the same thing that we did in Excellent Adventure, where we're going back in time to different historical periods and bringing all these key historical characters along for the ride. In this case, it's famous musicians. You know, you've got the likes of Jimi Hendrix, you've got Mozart, you've got all kinds of different people they bring along. Oh God, who's the famous trumpeter in it as well? Louis Armstrong. So I did actually really enjoy that storyline. I think it's nice to have that element, but whereas Bogus Journey was a complete overhaul to the structure of a sequel, you know, it didn't feel very retready. It was doing entire new things. It would have been very easy for them to basically remake the first film when they did Bogus Journey, but they didn't. They did the heaven and hell thing. With this one, you have the time traveling elements of the first film. You do go back to hell, you know, with death, and death comes back in this film again. So it feels more of an amalgamation of the previous two rather than going in a completely new direction, which I feel like this one probably should have done.
That's what I think. It's so easy. We mentioned this in the review yesterday for the double bill. Two could have carbon copied one, and it wouldn't have worked. And some comedies do that, but I think it works in its favor for this. That you bring in the daughters and you put the daughters on a journey that those two went on, essentially, probably at a similar age. And I think that was more interesting. I love the historical figures. This time they go for music rather than history. Granted, it's the same thing because this was going back in history, but I thought that was a nice spin on it. Some of the people they had in, I had no idea, minus spoiler, that Jimi Hendrix was going to be in it. I thought the guy that played him was great. That was really neat. He's one of my favorite sort of singers. And I just think that made it interesting. Like, okay, they haven't just gone back and got history people and chucked them in to say, here's a presentation. It was, you know, Bill and Ted, it's about the Wild Stallions, it's about music, and we don't get an awful lot of that, in all honesty, across the first two films. We get little clips of it here and there, but we don't get the full process, certainly doing scenes. And I like the fact that music was more consistent within this film than maybe the other two. And I think that was a really nice spin for this to be the finale, I guess you could say, as you mentioned, combining the both together, because it doesn't look like they could do a fourth one in that sense. To me, like it's pushing for a third one. So why not go out and take the things people enjoyed about the other two? Bringing a death back was great. The fact there was some off-screen things they hinted at as well was absolutely great as well. That's a really nice little touch. It just made it feel like something had happened over the years, rather than just they were Bill and Ted for 30 years, which we get that vibe of. I like the fact that it delves into off-screen dramas that we don't need to know about, but it's cool to know about. And I thought that was a really nice spin, because it just means characters get these moments with one another. And I think that's what you kind of need for something like this.
Yeah, and it was nice to bring, I'm just looking at the actor, William Sadler back as the Grim Reaper. He just jumped straight back into the role as well. I thought he was great. He doesn't get a lot to do in the film, but it's nice to have him back. In terms of the daughters' performances, I thought that Ted's daughter, played by Bridget Lundy-Paine, I thought she definitely outshined the one who played Bill's daughter. Bill's daughter's played by Samara Weaving. She was fine, but Bridget Lundy-Paine, she kind of threw herself physically into the role. She's got exactly the same mannerisms down as Keanu Reeves did from back in the day. Even like the body language, like the whole swaying of the body, the shoulders kind of rolled back kind of thing. So I thought even that duo as well didn't feel consistently together. There was definitely one that outshined the other one. And then you talked about things happening off screen as well. George Carlin, of course, who played Rufus, passed away in between 2 and 3. So there's a nice moment in the film where they reference him, and he gets a little moment in the film. So I thought that was really tastefully done. And then his daughter kind of who's played by Kristen Schaal, takes the Rufus role in this film. I thought she was fine. Again, like, fine is going to be the key word that runs throughout this. And there's another new character as well, one that I didn't care for, and kind of fell flat to me a little bit. It kind of felt like it was trying to be, you always get that sort of comedy sidekick character. In the second one, it was Death. In this one, it felt like they were trying to do it with, and he says his name, Dennis Caleb McCoy. This sort of robot character kind of felt flat a little bit for me. Didn't really land.
I didn't really understand it, in all honesty.
He was like a robot with an inferiority complex or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he wanted to be better, and I don't know if he was programmed incorrectly or if he just didn't like it or didn't want to do it. And it didn't click for me. I didn't ever laugh. I didn't ever find him funny. I don't think he had that, you know, when you introduce Death in the second film, he fits that world, absolutely. And the historical characters fit the films they're in they fit this film too. The people they go and bring into the future, and Robot Bill and Ted from Bill and Ted 2 fits perfectly. But robot antagonist turned good guy turned what's going on. I think it was flat. It was one of the he come on screen and was like, oh, okay, bored of this. You don't know if it's a man. I didn't know if it was going to be a plot twist, and it was Death as a robot as well, because he had the white makeup underneath the robot costume, and that bit didn't work. That was one of the most boring parts about it. I didn't want another sort of murderer type thing. Which, it was just, that was probably my biggest weak point of that is that character as such, if we can call it a character.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I don't really have much else to say. I suppose the look of the film I didn't really care for, especially watching 1 and 2 fairly recently. Very glossy, just look very like, even if I'm going to do a comparison, like when they go to hell in this film, you look at what they did with hell in Bogus Journey, very creative, lots of practical stuff. You had like the really shrunk down ceilings in the corridors. You had like this giant guy in a costume as Satan and the chains and everything, and it looks really cool and creative. And in this one, it's just a green screen with some volcanoes in the background and some demons flying around, and that's it. And even goes to the
future felt the same. When they go to the future, it's too easily a green screen. And not that we need to moan about stuff like that, but when the first two have not, the fact they've done it practically, it's a different era. But it makes this one, it looks too clean. If you can, criticism of the Star Wars prequels, or the world looks too clean. It's not dirty like the originals. And obviously, heading into 7 again, with the whole 30-year sequel thing. Tron did it, Star Wars did it. It's always interesting to look into it. And Episode 7's like, okay, one of our issues with the prequels is it's clean, it's tidy, it's shiny, it's CG. So they wanted to do the we lived in this world type thing. I know it's a very different franchise, and it did work in terms of set designs across that trilogy. Whereas Bill and Ted's like, why not just continue it? You've got the budget to do it. It's probably cheaper to build a set like that, or even have a photo. Do whatever you want. You could probably do that, but it was just even if it didn't look great, it would look like Bill and Ted. It's kind of the point that it's not clean, it's not shiny and new. It's this sort of not lived in. It's a horrible comparison, but it just didn't feel like a continuation of the other two. Like, we know time has passed, but everything just looks too new, too modern, too sleek. Even the Bill and Ted other characters we get to meet, I'm expecting to be ever so clunky, because it feels like that's in the production design rather than the budget, that it should look like that. And it didn't sort of, not a continuity standpoint, but it just didn't have that natural progression. It just felt too modern for Bill and Ted.
It was even down to the little things. It was like the very bright, clinical white, long bridges and huge structures and everything in the futuristic world. And then I remember back to that scene. It's my favorite scene out of all of the Bill and Ted films, from Excellent Adventure, where they go to the future, and all the people from the future sort of gather around in a circle and start doing this air guitar thing. Like that, essentially their gods have arrived. Plays this really nice sort of background song as well, this uplifting background song. And that's where they do the and party on, dudes. And then that's my favorite scene out of all 3 of the films. And that is literally just like polystyrene rocks with people in very cheap costumes. Even the watch that they have in this, there's this huge sort of like 3D hologram that comes out. And it's like, I remember to the first one, it was just like a digital watch, wasn't it? Or something. And he had to wind his watch on or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Very, very simple. So it's, in terms of the visual look, it didn't marry up for me, but I know that ironically now it's probably cheaper to go digital with effect. Well, I don't know with CGI stuff. Maybe not. I'd have to look into that than building sets and everything like that practically, but it's just something I wanted to bring up. So I think I've pretty much said everything I can for spoiler free. Probably going more into the ending now, so this is tending into the spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen Bill and Ted Face the Music just yet, just click off. There's not like masses amount of spoilers. It's a very predictable film, and you know exactly where it's going. So but in case you do want to know nothing, come back at a later date for this point. So there's a kind of shift, and the moment you try and think about this in sort of like the fabric of the time travel thing with the other films makes no sense. So apparently the future didn't know that it was the daughters who wrote the song, which if it happened in the past, why wouldn't they already know that in the future when they go back and, try and do Bill and Ted? So I did actually hear rumors about this before I saw the film. and I was very worried because I still was going into this film thinking that the daughters were going to overshadow Bill and Ted. It was going to be their film. And at the end, it turns out that Bill and Ted aren't the ones who are going to write the song, who are sort of like the champions of the universe, which they've been bigged up to be. It's actually the daughters that write the song that's going to unite the universe. I thought it was fine. I thought they handled it fine. It was sort of more the name, wasn't it? I think it was it Preston and Logan together? But it was actually the daughters that came up with the song. My problem is the song sucked. I really hate the ending song of the film. It just ended on a real whimper. I actually would have liked it if they'd have gone back to that scene that I mentioned from the first film where they go to the future very quickly and you've got that sort of like nice uplifting song that plays in the background. If that had have been the song that unites the world, it would have been that nice little nostalgic moment where it plays that song. It would have given more of the feel of Bill and Ted going back to that 89 one. But the one in the film was just so forgettable and just I don't really have any opinion on it. And it's such a shame as well, like when you've got like the ending of Bogus Journey, where there's that great sort of like musical moment they have at the end and it ends on a Kiss song. It's like, yes, God gave rock and roll to you. And this one just, it's like the most generic ending song. And also the ending, like if they had have played that original song from 89, that would have been a nice way to sort of effectively tie the film up. Because one of my biggest negatives of this film, the ending, it just ends. It's like they ran out of budget. The ending just drops off a cliff. And I guess we need to infer that, 30 years on, this is probably going to be the last Bill and Ted film. I don't see this making a lot of money. I certainly don't see it turning a massive profit, if at all. So I think we have to take this as the last time that we will see Bill and Ted. And I don't think it did an effective job of that. You have the moment where they play the song, but it needed another scene with Bill and Ted with their daughters or something in the garage or back at home or with the princesses and just some kind of like dialogue to tie it up. Maybe they just like take one last look at each other and both get in the telephone box, just something to end the film. There is a post-credit scene, which is fine, but even that doesn't feel like it's an effective ending for these characters. Yeah, so that's definitely one of my biggest problems. I don't know if stuff got cut or I don't know if that's the way it was written, but yeah, it's very sort of final, drops off the end of a cliff, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. I know it sounds horrible. I saw it today. I don't remember the song at the end. The only song I remember is from the wedding at the beginning.
That was a funny bit.
Yeah, and it was a nice mini twist that the daughters did the song, not us. But then it kind of contradicts itself again. Bill and Ted's not a film where you need to analyze it for time travel accuracies and stuff like that.
And Missy comes back in that scene as well. Sort of that continuing that running joke where now she's married Ted's younger brother. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. And that brother is another one like SNL cameo. That threw me probably more than anything. That's one of like SNL's main comedians. Never seen him in a film before, and it really took me out of it. It's not criticism; it's just nice to see a familiar face. But yeah, the song wasn't great, and it was it's a happy ending, isn't it? They played the song, they saved the world, but then it's the cut to credits. It's like what? Like just hit you, and that's it, done. Like click of the fingers, and it kind of threw me. I was like that. There's sudden endings, and there's that, and I didn't mind it. But it felt if this is the end of the trilogy. You don't need full closure. You don't need everything, but it deserves a bit better than cut to black, like shock cut to black. So yeah, it was a bit of a weird one. I won't lie. Getting into that ending part.
I guess we're going to final thoughts. As I said, I really don't have much else to say on this film. My favorite scenes in the film, ironically, were the ones where we sort of delved into the characters a little bit more. I liked the couple's counseling, their relationship fraying, all that stuff. The stuff they had some nice interaction with the daughters. My favorite scene was probably the bit where, Keanu Reeves' character says, like, I'm thinking of hanging this thing up. And there's some nice sort of like, it's not like a Dumb and Dumber 2 situation where they are literally the same characters. They haven't changed in all these years, because that is kind of sad when that happens.
Yeah,
there has been some progression to them in terms of their their relationships and their daughters and everything like that, and sort of where they stand now, their purpose in life. So that they are doing some stuff with the characters in a very minimal way. It's not a film where it needs to go in depth. I think it hits the right notes with it. And it was a fine way to kill 90 minutes. I didn't come out of this film like completely hating it or anything. It is my least favorite one of the three. I do think it probably could have been a lot better. But as it is, it's a nice film. In these times, you're just looking for escapism. And it gave me that. So it's not a film where I'm going to get all up in arms about. It was fine. It was perfectly average. The lower end of average, I would say, but it's Bill and Ted film.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was well, I did not enjoy it. It's not my favorite of the three. I probably prefer the second one still over this. I just think it was fine. It's not. I'm not gonna remember this. I'm not gonna I don't dislike it. I don't like it. I get people's attachment to it, and I think some people will find some bits they really enjoy from this. Some people may find things they dislike from this, but it just feels like, I think because, not that we've been spoiled, but because we've been on lockdown, we've had no films out, and me and you, we went in deep. We did all the no films, we did everything, and we've seen these films, and I've not seen many films over lockdown, and I've kind of forgotten that, you know, there are new films coming out, and you are going to see films that you don't remember that are just there. It's not boring that it's bad, but it's like, okay, I've seen it, I probably never go back to this.
Yeah, same.
And because I've not had that for so long, and because there's been so few films like this year in comparison, it feels weird now having one presented to me, because I've been in this mindset recently of every film I've seen has been, you know, I've been seeing the Nolan films, I've seen these, I've seen that, we've done our watch-alongs together. Most of them are classic films as well, to the point everyone speaks about, and to the point where I'm wanting to go back to the Harry Potter films for the first time in a couple of years. And it's come at me like, oh god, yeah, there's other films coming out, and there are other films that you won't care about. So that made me sound very negative, but that's my overall thoughts on this. It's fine. If you're a Bill and Ted fan, you'll probably like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. But I can't imagine anyone coming out annoyed at this film, because it does look like the two of them are having fun with each other. It's nice to revisit them. I think Alex Winters deserves all the praise. The daughters were great in it, and it was just nice to see, I guess, end. Bit harsh for me to say, because I've seen it in 3 days, all three of them.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, you know, if there are people that have waited years and years for this, be very intrigued to see what they want to say. But overall, for me, it's just one of them films that's been and gone.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And in terms of hearing from people, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of Bill and Ted Face the Music. How do you think it stacks up to the rest of the trilogy? Are you a Bill and Ted fan? Are you a newcomer? I was going to bring that up. Like, I don't see this as being a film that's going to bring in a new crowd. I think this is knows exactly what it is. It's made for those fans of the original, but maybe you are a newcomer to this. What did you think of it? And also follow us on social medias as well. We're just going to plug the social medias one last time. We've got Facebook and we've got Twitter. There we go. So Twitter, cinema_savvy, and Facebook is just Cinema Savvy on there. What are we doing next on the channel? That is the question.
It's the new, oh my god, this sounds so bad. There's a new Rob Pattinson format, and guys, it's not called Tenet. I believe me and Tate are doing a review for this. It's called The Devil All the Time. It's come out on Netflix today. We pre-recorded this on Wednesday the 16th. So that is a review that we've spoken about doing. So I expect that to be our next video. But if that isn't your kind of thing, it does have a great cast, I must say, by Tom Holland. We did a Mandalorian trailer 2 reaction yesterday, which you can find on our channel. Got a couple of people tuning in. And if you've enjoyed this video, we do have our Bill and Ted double review, which you can see in the channel below. But yeah, it's kind of, we've had this big burst recently. We've been, I'm going to plug again the remodeling. We've got this new franchise playlist where we've done up the artwork for some of the film franchises you may love. You've probably seen most films from, and perhaps you're wondering why I've never spoken about them. The like is we covered them many years ago. So we now have a Star Wars playlist with every single review we've ever done. That goes from prequels, originals, sequels, spin-offs. Everything we've done across the years is on there. We've got Harry Potter one from a Meaning of Harry Potter month back in 2016. It's got all 8 films. And tonight we now have a Pirates of the Caribbean playlist, which has the 5 reviews we did back in 2017. So it's a bit of a throwback going through them. But it's just more content for you guys that are newer to us. We've got some new people that have come in that have liked our videos. So it's more for them if you want to catch up to what we were like in the past. We sound the same. The shock is that we're not live on StreamYard. We have the intro video still going. You may even see our old name, the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. But in terms of what's coming next, as usual, find out via social media. I'm going to try and use the YouTube channel thing a little bit more. So if you do like that community thing, just comment and let us know. But we've even added an origin story into the About section on the YouTube channel. So if you're really bored, do check that out. But like I said, film review should be that Netflix one coming next. And next week is Enola Holmes. So that will be up. But yeah, September's flying. We're already.
It is, yeah. But October's going to be very busy. We have a lot of things planned for October, so definitely hit the subscribe button, like, share, comment, all of that good stuff. And whatever the next video is, whether it's a review, a quiz, whatever it happens to be, a discussion video, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers for watching, guys.